Welcome to The Self-Led Woman. This is a podcast about emotional eating, the experiences that shape our relationships with food, and the path back to self-leadership. These conversations go beneath behavior, held with deep respect for the wisdom of the body and the ways it learned to cope, adapt, and survive. And when we can peel back those layers and meet the parts of ourselves that need care, we begin to see that food was never the problem, and we can return to who we really are. I'm your host, Megan Darnell. Let's dive right in. This episode discusses eating disorders, binge eating, restriction, and exercise. If topics like this feel sensitive or triggering for you, please take care while listening. You might choose to pause the episode and come back to it when you feel supported or resourced. And if this conversation brings up anything difficult for you, please consider reaching out to a trained professional or support service. In Australia, you can contact Lifeline on 131114 or the Butterfly Foundation National Helpline on 1800 334 673, which supports people experiencing eating disorders and body image concerns. In my late 20s, sitting on the therapy couch across from the therapist, sitting next to my mum, thinking, this is a terrible idea. But my therapist said this is what needs to happen. If I wanted to move forward on my healing, I had to work on the relationship with my mum. I had to heal stuff within that relationship. And I disagreed with her and I said, I think this is a terrible idea. I don't think it's worth even exploring. But she said, this is what needs to happen. So I asked my mum to come along to therapy. And the therapist was asking my mum about some things that had happened when I was younger. And my mum just said something that she said to me many times before. That never happened. I would never do that. And I just said, why would I make that up? And eventually she admitted that some of these things had happened. And then with another response, which if you have boomer parents who are also emotionally immature, this will be possibly something you've heard before. She said, it's not a big deal, Megan. It was so long ago. Why don't you just get over it? And the therapist just said something simple to her like, this might not be a big deal to you, but it's a big deal to Megan. And for maybe a small second, I thought maybe something had landed. A penny had dropped. She never said a word. But the truth is, I guess the intention behind that therapy session was to start to repair things. And I never got that repair that I was hoping for in that room or in general. I never got it. I never got the acknowledgement that I was looking for. At the time, though, that felt devastating to me. What I wanted more than anything was for my mum to understand and for her to see me. I wanted her desperately to repair what had happened. I completely understand now that I was looking for something that she did not have the capacity to give. But this moment, when I look back, sits at a very pivotal moment of my emotional eating journey. For a long time, I thought my struggles were about food, but they weren't. They were for a much deeper longing. And that was to be mothered in the way that I needed to be mothered. I used to tell myself my emotional eating was a discipline problem, that I lacked willpower, that if I just controlled myself and controlled my food, it would get better. But it just sent me down a long path trying to find the thing that would finally fix me. Even the fact that I thought I needed to be fixed in itself, you could pick that apart. If you have listened to episode 1, where I talk about I thought my body was the problem. I speak about that moment where I felt like I needed help. I finally admitted to myself, I need some help here. And that was when I went to see this therapist. And she'd given me a book on bulimia. I don't have the kind of bulimia that is depicted by media, and I didn't know that this was what it could be considered. However, I had the type of bulimia where you would restrict and then you would binge and then you would purge, but you would purge by exercising. And she gave me this book on bulimia to read, and some of it applied, but it was really hard to wrap my head around because I'd never really identified that this could be some sort of eating disorder. I just thought I had these struggles, or had, even a thought that it could possibly be bulimic behavior. But I was over-exercising to compensate for eating. And when I recognized that was a form of purging, it was like binging at night, and then I'd punish myself the next day. And those mornings where I'd wake up back then after I'd had binges, but the first thought in my head, the moment I would wake up, like it was a sense of shame, and that was I wouldn't have used these words, but it was like, I need to punish my body for what I've done. So I'd go to the gym and push myself as hard as I possibly could. I'd sometimes go back to the gym that night and train again and go as hard as I could, not from a place of love, from a place of punishment. And the strange part is that people praise this behavior. When I was at my absolute worst mentally, I got so much praise. I might say that I could even, not that I really spoke about binging, but I might have said, I ate so much last night, so I'm smashing myself at the gym today. And people would say, good on you. And when I look back and see that, I'm like, that's a socially acceptable form of punishment. How insane is that? But since then, like, knowing that I needed some help and support, I tried so many other things. I tried hypnotherapy. I tried acupuncture. I tried kinesiology. I had a past life regression healing. I tried breathwork, self-help books. I put affirmations like on post-its all around my house. I hired personal trainers. I tried high protein diets and low carb diets and nutrition plans. I tried intuitively eating, which at the time, at the beginning of my journey of wanting to heal, it actually made me far worse and created much more chaos in my mind because I couldn't intuitively eat. I didn't even know what my hunger and fullness cues were. I was that disconnected from my body. I tried sleeping more so I wouldn't eat. I tried having more caffeine. Then I tried cutting caffeine. People tell you that caffeine is an appetite suppressant, so I tried that. And then I heard that caffeine messes with your blood sugar, so I tried that. Cutting it. Tried herbal teas, actual appetite suppressants, juice cleansers, the lemon detox diet if you've been around that long. I ran a marathon, and I mean, to be fair, it was probably one of the best achievements of my life, but I was running to try and run off all the food I was eating. At one point, I worked with a naturopath who had me on supplements and had taught me, like, this is how you need to eat in a way to stabilize your blood sugar. And there was a moment that really sums up that period of my life. I remember sitting at my kitchen table with all the supplements lined up in front of me and thinking, like, there were so many, but I remember thinking, how is it possible that I'm trying this hard and it's still not working? At one point, I would take my mouth up at night. I know people do that for breathing, like to breathe through your nose when you're sleeping, but I would do it in the hope that when I would wake up, and if you want to go back and listen to episode 4, I talk about my experience with how I would wake up and binge. I would tape my mouth up, not for my breathing, because I thought that that might be the thing that would be the circuit breaker that would stop me from binging. It didn't. If I'm really honest, a part of me hoped that I could stop binging but continue restricting at that time, my late 20s. Like, that's how I felt. I also had hunger that felt like it would never go away or never be satisfied. I would try telling myself, I'm not hungry. And technically that was true. Like, probably wasn't physically hungry, but again, I couldn't feel my hunger and fullness cues. I would say something to myself like, you just ate, you're not hungry. But there was this hunger there that I could not satisfy no matter what I ate. No matter how disciplined I tried to be. I understand now, which I didn't back then, it was a different type of hunger. It's what I would refer to as developmental hunger. It's a hunger for something other than food. It has nothing to do with food. And I was stuck in this cycle where I would follow a plan, and every time I would start a new plan or start on Monday, I would be like, this is it. This is the thing that's going to fix me. And there was underneath this, what would appear to be discipline on the outside, there was just so much pressure and perfectionism driving it that eventually something in me would snap and I would binge again. And every single time it happened, I felt like I'd failed. And I used to have this dialogue inside, like my inner critic would say, what is wrong with you? Why can't you just get it together? Why don't you have any willpower? But I understand that every single thing that I tried to try and help my emotional eating, to try and fix it, to try and stop it, none of these strategies were addressing the real thing underneath. Emotional eating is not a food problem. Food is just where the pattern shows up for something much deeper. Maybe it's grief or loneliness for you, or suppressed anger or resentment, or you've just been carrying way too much responsibility for too long. Maybe you just feel really unseen, or that you have to hold everything together. But very often, it's this underneath all of that, there's a longing to be mothered, a longing to be held. And some of us haven't felt held or mothered. And that doesn't have to be from your actual mother, just in general, that nurturing energy. Some of us have not felt that in a really, really long time. And some of us may not have ever felt like we were mothered or nurtured. And this leads me into speaking on cravings. This is something really interesting about cravings, and we spoke about this with my guest Lottie Davies in episode 17. We spoke about how women can crave sweetness. And she spoke about, in Chinese medicine, the taste of sweetness is often associated with the element of earth. Earth. It's the mother. But also when we crave sweetness, when we're looking at it from a craving perspective in my work, what we're actually craving is softness, is sweetness, like love, nurturing, care, comfort. And sometimes they were things that we didn't receive when we were younger, or we don't feel like we've received them now for a really long time. See, the body is always speaking to you. So, like, when we speak to, like, learning to mother yourself, like, I know now the deeper healing work for me was not about, fixing the food issue. It was about learning something that I had never been taught, and that was how to mother myself, how to offer myself the softness, care and regulation and support, and being able to hold myself through no matter what I'm going through with compassion, not with I'm going to try and fix this or stuff it down or make it go away, from a place of compassion. In the way that the little girl in you always deserved to be held. Not from a place of fixing, but from a place of care. And my work led me there, which is so beautiful. But prior to that, it was like the food that I was consuming, I had been trying to get that need met through food. And this is why I say, like, food is not the problem. It's like speaking to something much deeper. But food was a place for me where my nervous system was trying to regulate. And if you didn't have an attuned parent, or you weren't nurtured in that way where someone could hold you in your big emotions, and all women I speak to that struggle with eating were very sensitive, intuitive, perceptive young girls. And a lot of them didn't have that attunement where someone could just hold them in their big emotions and stay with them in that. It was like, you're too sensitive, stop crying, all of those things, which just teaches us to like self-abandon and not be able to hold ourselves through those things. When I started to do work on the deeper stuff underneath the eating behaviors, that's when things began to shift. And instead of like fighting my body, I started listening to it. And it was a really slow process, but I got there. And I stopped punishing myself. And slowly the pressure that had been driving the behavior, the perfectionism, the lack of compassion that I had for myself, that stuff began to dissolve. It's like these are our protector parts because they think they need to do this job. But when we can help them to heal, they drop the behaviors of that. So we can come back to ourselves and mother ourselves. And we know how to do that. But you have to work with those parts first that are standing in the way, trying to protect you. But they're just running an old script, or they're doing something that may have worked for you once upon a time and it doesn't work anymore. So if you're listening to all of this and you feel the same, like you've just tried everything, like the plans, the diets, tried discipline, like tried, hypnotherapy, tapping, acupuncture, kinesiology, like these things are great and they all have their place, but I can tell you hand on heart, they did not work for me when it came to my emotional eating. There was something much deeper underneath that needed to be healed. I want you to know, like, you don't lack willpower and there's nothing wrong with you. You've just been trying to solve something else with food, but emotional eating isn't about food, it's emotional. There's a deeper longing to be held, to be supported, to feel safe in your body. And when you can do the necessary healing work, that brings you back to being able to offer that to yourself, not through force, but just through, what to do. When you can offer that to yourself, like, everything changes. No, this podcast is for education and reflection only. It is not a substitute for therapy or healthcare. If this episode brought things up for you and you need support, please reach out to a trained therapy practitioner or health professional in your area. Thank you so much for listening. If this episode resonated, please follow or subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, or share it with someone who might benefit from hearing it. You can also connect with me on Instagram at Megan Darnell Therapy. If you share the episode or want to let me know what landed for you, you're always welcome to message or tag me. I love hearing from you guys. Until next time, I'm Megan Darnell, and this is The Self-Led Woman.